Throughout the years, mental health has been something that athletes have struggled with tremendously. They feel as if they cannot open up and say what is really going on inside their heads. However, as of recent, they have begun to open up and shed light on the issue. We took a deeper dive into different perspectives to see what is really going on inside an athlete's head.
I have seen students go into a deep depression when their season is over.
I've heard a lot of parents over the years look back and say, I wish I would have just enjoyed the game. I wish I would have told my kid how proud I was of them. I wish I would have, looked at the role they were serving and reminded them how important that role was. I wish I wouldn't have pushed my kids as hard as I did. I wish we wouldn't have spent every single weekend traveling across the whole state of Michigan just so they could play on this AAU team or do this. And so I think as a parent, you just have to remind yourself that this is a small amount of time in your kid's life, and you need to really savor it and enjoy it.
I am biased, but I think that it is. I think it's taken very seriously. I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we think it belongs on a few different professionals in the building, when really anybody with mental health is responsible for it. And that's for you and for the people around you, and creating a culture that sort of like enables mental health to be talked about more.
I think the schools kind of are a mixed bag when it comes to helping students balance the social and the academic, because there's not really, in a lot of schools, there's not common guidelines for how much homework teachers should assign, for example. So you can end up with a course load one semester where every teacher is just doing a boatloads of homework, and the next semester it could be like the exact opposite. I think that homework has a role in our education, but I think that it's probably a role that we don't understand well enough as teachers, and so a lot of things that get assigned at home are needless pressure on students' lives. I think, and I always say this to my students, you gotta be academically successful, but you also want to be enjoying the process. And when we overload students with homework, it's hard to enjoy the process.
It gets to a point where it feels like a lot, for sure, and I know you probably dealt with that, especially when there's like a night where you have a test the next day, plus you have a game the next day, so you're trying to focus on like watching film, plus answer like some questions and whatnot. So I don't know, it gets stressful, but really you just got to focus on just getting by. Like, not always in life everything's gonna be perfect, so you're not always gonna have an A, you're not always gonna get 5 sacks a game, So just work as hard as you can, study as much as you can, work as hard as you can, just go to sleep knowing you did what you can, and that's better than just like stressing and not doing anything.
So I think as a parent, we play one of the biggest roles when it comes to how our athletes process through really the pressure of being a student athlete. I think often, parents have to remember that this is not their athletic career, it's their students, their athlete, their child's athletic career. I would say overall, anything that a parent says is their intentions are great. They want to be supportive of their kid. They want them to be successful. They want all of those things. But sometimes we forget how sometimes the things we say or the things we don't say or the pressures that we put on, how they can really impact kids.
I, in my role as counselor, have seen a significant impact of mental health on athletes.
All right, I've seen a lot of athletes being impacted by stress in my classroom.
I've seen it both positive and negative.
It's little things like on test day, getting real jittery, telling themselves messages like, I'm gonna be bad at this test, I'm gonna fail. I see those types of things all the time.
Being an athlete, especially a student athlete, and high performance in the classroom and then also on the athletic field is a huge job for our kids. And the amount of time that our kids put in and just the high stakes that they go through, we should never as parents underestimate that.
I think the positive is like just the benefit that you get from being on a team, the benefit that you get from exercise, but then the stress that comes along with competition.
Then when you add on the athlete side of things, it takes up time outside of school. and you got eligibility that students get worried about, and that's the type of stuff that I see just compounding in the hearts and minds of young people who are athletes, and it breaks my heart.
Being a high school athlete and a college athlete, I feel like they're very different experiences as far as the amount of pressure and intensity you might feel from parents, coaches, community, crowd, all of that. But the one common theme I would say being a student athlete is, and people don't, I think, get it unless they're in it, is just the amount of pressure.
I don't know if students are scared to talk about it, or maybe they don't have the right words.
There's a big stigma around discussing mental health in school. I think there's still a wide perception that I have to have it all together as a student, as an athlete, as a teenager.
But I think it's our job to create that culture that gives students the right words to be able to either reach out for help or to know that they have a safe place to land when they need that help.
And it's a bad misperception. Basically, it results in, from what I see in my class, kids with just walking around, looks like they got the whole world bottled up inside of them. And I would always encourage students to talk about when they're struggling. I think that they'll quickly find that they're not alone.
I think anxiety can get the best of anyone, and in sports, same. I think we all move forward with anxiety, but students cope in different ways. I think all humans cope in different ways. So I've seen it go two ways. Athletes feeling the stress of competition and then choosing to cope with something outside of themselves, like a substance or self-harm. I think if you can embrace that stress or have positive coping, that is a more proactive way to deal with mental health.
I think probably as a society, we just ask, it's like everything has to be to 11. So in our athletics, if you compare varsity athletics today to varsity athletics 20 years ago, I think the expectations are crazier. They're higher. The level of performance is higher. And so in order to compete, you just got to put in all the extra time. But to me, that's also kind of just society at large. There is more pressure in life these days, and our students have to learn how to manage the pressures of life, and they've got to figure out how to make decisions. If you're going to be in this sport, do you really want to take all these advanced classes, and do you really also want to be in this club? I think that those are the types of decisions we could do better as a school system to talk to our students about and help them to make.
And so we have to be really mindful and remind ourselves about what we say, what we do, and really just be conscious of the pressures that we might put on our kids.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure and stress.
There's pressure to always be your best. There's pressure to you can't mess up. There's pressure you have to be perfect. There's pressure that you have to not only be a great athlete, but you got to be a great student, and then you got to be a great leader, and then it is constantly coming at you, and it can be really overwhelming.
It's a serious thing. We a lot of times just throw pressure onto our young people, and human beings can only stand so much pressure. You need a little bit of pressure in your life. You got to have some pressure if you're going to optimize your performance, but once you get past optimal pressure, which is where a lot of our young people are at, then it can really be a soul-crushing experience.
And when you get into college, there's also this, you've attained something that not everybody else gets this opportunity to do it. And so I think there is this layer of people are always watching you, there's eyes always on you. And I think it adds also to that pressure of having to be perfect and, not being able to just be like everybody else and have a bad day or an off day. And that's a lot to put on young adults who are just trying to figure out how to maneuver through the world.
It was more my junior year. It was harder because I was trying to get recruited, and when you put a lot of stuff out there, like I'm 6'3", I'm this, I'm that, you got to live up to that all the time, so it puts pressure on you knowing you have all those eyes. But when you just take that away from yourself and just focus on the game and just being grounded, being with your buddies, working hard, it takes that all away.
And I think, whether you're an athlete or you're in band or you're in drama or whatever you're doing outside of, your academic school day, there is this pressure to always be on, and to always be good, and we are just expected to never mess up, and it's just not real.
I think that I know that our standards at Cedar Springs are higher than like other districts around us, especially to maintain eligibility. I think that with that awareness, we also provide other supports. I'm wondering if the barrier in like taking the adults up on those supports is time, because the time is already limited by school and then sports. And then to get the extra support needed to do well in those sports, it all takes time.
You know, if I could give one piece of advice to kids and to parents, I think to kids I would say, you know, you've got to be honest and open with your parents about how you're feeling, and you need to make sure you're truthful and you advocate for what you need. Your parents are only there to do what's best for you, and they want to support you, and if they're doing something that doesn't support you and you don't tell them, they don't know. So my advice to athletes would just be is advocate for yourself and let your parents know what you need.
Yeah, and that's my question too, is like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, first I think it's admitting it to yourself, right? Like being able to look at it and say, yeah, it's time to get help now. Because I think we sometimes, I know I felt it as an athlete, we expect our young adults to have all the skills to maneuver through how to do all these things, and yet they're still really young and trying to figure it all out. I think I've talked a lot with students this year about knowing when to get help and who to reach out to.
I fortunately was able to surround myself with a lot of really good people that in front of them it was a safe space to say that I was having a rough day or that I needed a break. And I just think that's carried on into my adulthood.
Because I think a lot of students lean on each other for support, which is really good. And that's one of the 3 things that I suggest. But I think the best tool is to reach out to an adult who can make a difference. And I know that a lot of coaches are people that students can trust.
And I don't know, when I was growing up, if there was the safeness, I guess, to just name that I'm struggling. We just had to push through, and you just had to do, and you had to do, and you had to do. And I think I noticed in high school and in college that really burnt a lot of athletes out. And so I wish I would have had permission to say, I'm not perfect. I didn't do that as well as I could have, but I want to try again, or I need a break, or I need to pause. Those just weren't options. And I'm grateful that they have become options now for our student athletes to recognize that being perfect's not the goal. We're gonna mess up. You're gonna have times where you don't do your best. So that's the part that I am grateful now, that it has become more acceptable to be real with where you are and what you have to do moving forward.
So it's just like asking for help at the right point and using coping strategies at the right point so that you get to move forward to the best of your ability. So that was a long answer too. I think everybody has anxiety, but how are we dealing with it?
Listen to your kids. Not only listen, but watch. A lot of times kids don't always say what they need, but they might show you what they need. But be aware of what your kids may need. And then also celebrate your kid. And not just because they're an athlete. Celebrate your kid because they're doing great things. Don't let athletics be the only thing that is their identity or identifies who they are. Help them become well-rounded, and enjoy it, because you're only going to get to be a parent of an athlete for a small amount of time.
It causes stress because outside of my close buddies and my family, I get lots of hate and stuff online that I would have never expected. And before you learn how to deal with that, that's kind of tough, because it makes you think oh, am I really this? Am I really that? But then you realize all the kids saying stuff are below you, and they just want to be where you're at. That's why they're saying those things.
I think another piece that comes along with that is, as a student athlete, there is this expectation, and the reality of it is that everyone's watching you. whether that is, when you're in high school, it's the younger kids that are in elementary, or the kids that are in, the teams, your freshman, your JV teams. I mean, there's always that pressure. You're being looked at as the role model.
I don't know, like once you learn how to deal with those things, it just makes you like feel happy, because you're like, I've worked to get to where I'm at right now, and I have like my family and close buddies supporting me, and I have people that are attacking me online and whatever. Like that feels good, because like when you're hated, that's just like a blessing in disguise, you know what I mean?
I think it's just really important as a parent that we accept who our kid is, whatever role there is on their team, and we find that balance of pushing them, but also, accepting them. So fortunately, I think growing up as an athlete, a college and high school athlete, though there was a lot of pressure on me and I didn't have the opportunities to pause or say I need help or, ask for a day off, I do think that I fortunately still had a lot of good people I surrounded myself with. In front of them, it was a safe space to say that I was having a rough day or that I needed a break. And I just think that's carried on, I would say, between coaching and parenting. Like those are the two most challenging but also most rewarding roles that I've ever been able to serve in.
I would just encourage educators, teenagers, parents to all be a little more mindful and aware of pressure levels in their life.
I think whatever role you are, whether you're a parent, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, whether you're, an administrator, that you have to be willing to advocate for yourself when you don't know the answers, or when you need resources or help, that you're worth reaching out, and it's worth reaching out to help and support others.
I would always encourage students to talk about when they're struggling. I think that they'll quickly find that they're not alone.